Good morning.
Good morning. Enubrata das.
Yeah, hi. This is Anuprita here.
Doing good, thank you.
I think we have to move over to YouTube.
No, I am a member of Real, but it will be on YouTube, yes.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours.
Good morning, David.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, welcome to Office Hours. Today is a special Office Hours. We're live streaming to YouTube, and we're going to be doing a Q&A on the Python Basics paperback. For anyone watching there on YouTube, this is a members-only chat that we do every week for Real Python. It's called the Office Hours. If you're a member of Real Python, you have access to this. We're making this public today to kind of support the Python Basics paperback and give you a taste of what the Q&A looks like. I'm not going to be interacting with anyone on the YouTube stream. So if you have questions or anything there, I apologize that I'm not going to be able to answer those. I'm going to be taking the questions and everything from the Python members that are here in our Zoom chat. But I do want to go ahead and kick off quickly with a quick recap of PyCoders like we do every week, and talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of Python. So let me share my screen and get PyCoders up. So PyCoders is a weekly newsletter that curated by myself and Dan Bader. It goes out every Tuesday and just has a roundup of news and articles and cool projects to check out. It's also got some job postings that we put in there and a link to our job board, pythonjobshq.com. And there was quite a bit going on this week. So I'll cover some of the news real quick. They released, I think it was on April 2nd, Python 3.9.3, and introduced a bug that they quickly had to recall 3.9.3 and publish this hotfix for Python 3.9.4. So if you've upgraded to 3.9.3, it's suggested that you upgrade to 3.9.4 as soon as possible. The 3.9.3 was released with some important security fixes, and the bug that they accidentally introduced in 3.9.3 wasn't a security issue, as I understand it. It was actually they call it an ABI compatibility issue. So one of the things is that Python guarantees that within a given language series, so like 3.9.1, 2.3, binary extensions written in C or C++ and compiled against the headers for that 3.9 release will be importable from other versions in the same series. If this weren't the case, then library authors would have to ship separate binary wheels for every single bug fix release of Python. So like every time they released a patch version, like 3.9.2, 3.9.3, then all these libraries would have to recompile all their wheels and release those separately, which would be a huge burden on library maintainers. So something in that broke in 3.9.3, and they fixed it now in 3.9.4. So just a heads up there that if you're on 3.9 and you should be on 3.9.4 to get the security fixes that they released, and also make sure that any external packages are going to work with it properly. We've also got Django 3.2 is now finally released. I think that was April 5th. So I believe it was on Monday this week that they got that out. That is a pretty major release and has some pretty big changes in it. Some of the biggest ones have to do with indexing, database indexes, and things like that. There's some new admin site decorators. So definitely check that out. It's a pretty exciting release. And we've also got the final alpha version of 3.10.0 that was released. I think it was actually yesterday that they released this. So this is the last planned alpha release. And an alpha release just means that, they're still kind of working out the API and things like that. So during an alpha, you could see things change. The names of anything like functions or things like that could change. And there could also be some pretty significant bugs. I mean, they're releasing these as a way for people to test and report any bugs that they find. So this is the last one, and we should see the first beta for 3.10 coming out within probably the next month or so. And at that point, they're going to freeze all the features. So there won't be any new features added to 3.10 once it goes into the beta phase. It'll just be bug fixes for anything, and maybe performance improvements and things like that until October, which is when they're going to release the final version of 3.10. And I know we've talked a little bit about this in office hours before, but one of the big things coming in 3.10 is the structural pattern matching. That's the new match case statement, which sort of looks like a switch case kind of structure, but is a little bit different and actually far more powerful than something you'd find like in the C language, for example. So that's a really big change to the core syntax, and that's going to be something we're going to be talking a lot more about during office hours. And we'll have an article on Real Python that talks all about pattern matching and how it works, so that you can get up to speed with it if it's something you're interested in using. And sorry, I just got a direct message from someone that says that something's kind of funky with my mic. Does my mic sound okay to everyone? Is it kind of crackly or poppy?
It's loud and clear.
Loud and clear? Okay. Well, let me know if you can't hear or understand or anything. Just feel free to jump in, and I will repeat myself or something like that. It could be internet connection. The monitor from my mic itself sounds very clear, so we'll see. All right, moving on. CircuitPython 6.2 was released. So if you're familiar with CircuitPython, or if you're not familiar with CircuitPython, that is the microcontroller version of Python. It's a fork of something called MicroPython, which is also for like microcontrollers and embedded Python on devices. So Python on hardware. And CircuitPython is an exciting one, and they've been doing a lot of work on it. And if you're into that kind of stuff, definitely check that out. So that's all the big news, quite a lot of news. And then just some of interesting things that were going on Real Python. We released a new course called Python versus Java, Object-Oriented Programming. So this is really meant for people who are familiar with Java, and are coming to Python from that Java background, to kind of get you up to speed with some of the differences between object-oriented programming in Java versus Python, like what objects are in Java and what they are in Python, how they differ, those kinds of things. So if you have a Java background, you'll probably be, and you're new to Python, you'll probably be interested in checking out this course to help you kind of better understand what the differences are, because there are some pretty big differences. We also had our first ever Python news article written by myself. And I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to read this, but this is kind of a new column that we're trying out. It'd be like a monthly article that I publish that just is kind of a roundup of all the big news in the Python space for the last month. So for example, we covered a couple things from February, just because we didn't get a chance to do anything in February. And there are a couple of cool things that happened. For example, Python turned 30 years old, and the Python Software Foundation also celebrated its 20th anniversary, two big milestones there. We talked about structural pattern matching, and how Python was used in the Perseverance Mars rover. Some cool things there. The 2020 Python Developer Survey results and some of the key stats and changes that we saw there from the previous year, with one of the most interesting ones to me being in web frameworks. So Flask and Django have pretty much always been like right at the top for a long time as the two most popular web frameworks in Python. There's a new framework, relatively new, called Fast API, which some of you may have heard of. That this was the first year that they included that as a choice on like the selection of like what's your favorite framework, or what framework do you use the most. And on its first year, it took the third place, taking about 12% of the share of respondents, which I think is a pretty amazing feat for, like, you know, just the first time they've included that. So, and Fast API has been growing extremely fast. No pun intended. And it's a really fascinating framework, really cool framework. So I'm excited to see that being used and gaining so much popularity. We also talked about some of the new features coming to Django 3.2. So if you're interested in that, this article covers a couple of the things that are there, and a few other kind of interesting news items. PEP 621 reaching the final status. So PEP 621 has to do with packaging. And I know we've had a lot of questions in office hours about packaging. Things are kind of changing a little bit in that landscape. And I think that it's just going to get better. I think they're making a lot of good changes there. And hopefully, you know, in the coming years, we'll see that that part of Python kind of, you know, become a little bit less complex. What they did in PEP 621 doesn't really sound super important or like a big deal, but what they did was they introduced a while ago, back in 2016 actually, this thing called the pyproject.toml file, which was a place to store, like in a static file, store your project's build dependencies. Previously, you had to put these into setup py, which is an executable Python script. And the problem with that was, in order to read the build dependencies in setup py, you had to execute it, which meant you had to have some of the build dependencies installed. So there's like this circular kind of like chicken and egg kind of thing. Like you need the build dependencies to be able to read what build dependencies you need. So it was just kind of a mess. And it made it difficult to sort of automate things, which is kind of the real problem. I mean, you could go in and manually read, you know, the file and see what you needed. But if you wanted to try to automate anything, that's where some of the issues came up. So pyproject.toml really was meant to deal with that issue. And its primary reason for being created was to store build dependencies. Well, now it's kind of moved into also being used to store package configuration, which if you use the black auto formatter, it uses pyproject.toml to store its configuration. And PEP 621 now introduces kind of a standardized way to store project metadata. which is like, the name of the author's email, version number, things like that. There's these specifiers that specify like which versions of Python it's compatible with, like what sort of like subject it's related to, and things like that. So all the metadata about your project there's a standardized way to store that in pyproject.toml, which what this really represents is a continued movement away from setup py, and into using these static files as a way to store everything, so that you don't need any kind of external dependency to read it or execute it or things like that. So again, it doesn't seem super important, but I think it's a really interesting development, and I'm excited kind of where the packaging landscape is going, and what the future has in store for that. And then the last one, this is kind of a big one. PyPI is now a GitHub secret scanning integrator, which means that GitHub is going to scan Python projects on GitHub for leaked PyPI API keys. So that's like, you need an API key in order to publish something to the Python package index. And if you leak your API key, that means someone could potentially, with malicious intent, steal your API key and do something bad with your packages. So this helps keep the package index more secure, which is a really good thing. And if you happen to leak your PyPI API token, that's a mouthful, then when GitHub recognizes it, it will actually deactivate your repository and notify you that, hey, you've got a leaked token in there and you need to remove it. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing they've got going on to help keep everything secure, so that try to keep malicious packages off the index. So I'd be curious to know what you thought about the article if you had a chance to read it, whether you liked it, and I think we should keep doing it, because I had a good time writing it. So and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let's see. And then one last thing before we dive into a Q&A. Well, I guess really two last things. I wanted to just mention this first article, how I beat the Berlin rental market with a Python script. So this, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of the article itself. It's not super technical. Like there's not even any code in it, but it does talk about like some of the packages this person used and things like that. But kind of the story here, and what I thought was so interesting about it was, this person lives in Berlin and was trying to, I think, buy a house. It says rental market, but maybe it was just rent a house. The takeaway takeaway that I got from it was that they were purchasing a house, but maybe I misread something. But it's a super competitive market. It's extremely difficult to find a rental house in Berlin, apparently. I'm not personally familiar with it, but it sounds like it's like extremely competitive. And this person used Python to sort of figure out like where the rentals were, and he used like some spatial analysis to kind of figure out like where the rentals were and like where he wanted to live, and probably put in some sort of like error, like radius, like as long as I'm this close to it, it's okay. And then he used some not sure if he used machine learning or just something to basically predict like how well the price of the rental actually matched like the true value, like whether it was really worth it or it was just super overpriced, or maybe it was like underpriced and was a really good deal. And then on top of that, also predict like when it was about to be sold. Like, was it even worth applying for this property, or was it going to be sold soon? And if it wasn't going to be sold, was there any chance that the price was going to decrease because of the seller or the renter wasn't getting any getting enough traction or something like that? So it's kind of one of these neat examples of where just knowing some Python and being a little creative with it can help you take this, this problem, this like everyday problem of like, I have to find a place to live. And, it's going to take me hours and hours and hours to do research and find a rental. Well, I can just write a script that will kind of do the research for me and then give me the results, and I can sort of zero in on specifically what I'm interested in. So I thought that was really, really interesting. It's not a super long article, and again, it's not very technical. It's just sort of like a case study. But I thought that was really, really neat, an interesting idea. So how to beat the Berlin rental market. If you're looking for housing, maybe you can take some inspiration from this and see if you can find a good deal on something near you. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is we kind of did something a little bit different with PyCoders this week. We included fewer links, and I focused on the links that I thought kind of provided the most value or were the most important of all the research that I did. And I wrote longer descriptions that tried to give you a better idea of like, what is this about and why would you be interested in reading it? So if you subscribe to PyCoders, I'd really be interested in knowing, and you can just sort of, drop this in the chat. If you just say like, yes, I like that, or, you like the old style where it's just kind of like a larger collection of links with short descriptions. Let me know, because I think this provides more value, but but that's just me. So I'm curious to know what everyone else thinks on that. All right, so that definitely wraps up the PyCoders roundup. So at this point, I want to move on to any Q&A, any questions that you guys have about the Python Basics book. And I guess real quick, let me just look at the chat here and see if there's been anything posted. Jinyu, I guess Martin already answered your question. You said, is real Python built using Django? And yeah, it is. Jinyu said, if you wanted to build a personal website that posts my blogs with words and lots of mathematical expressions and videos, can Django framework do what I need? It can, although for something like a personal website, where like you're just going to be blogging, I would really recommend something more like a static site, one of these like static generators. Pelican is the one that I use on my personal site that I really like. There's a few other ones. There's a Lector, Lektor is one. These are all Python static site generators. There are other ones written in other languages. Like I know Gatsby is a JavaScript one that is pretty popular. But I find that just better for personal sites because you can write in Markdown or just plain text. And, once you kind of get it set up, then when you want to publish like a blog post, you just write it in Markdown and save it, and then like build your site with like a simple command, and then publish it, and it's all good to go. And there's no like server basically. I mean, there is a server hosting your site, but you end up with like a very, very fast website because it's not like processing any request from the client. It's just every request it gets, it's just returning that static page that you've created, and you get a like huge performance boost doing that. Django does have a plugin that allows you to use Markdown in like the CMS, but it doesn't come standard with Django. It's like a plugin you have to download separately. I think it's just Django Markdown or something like that. But anyways, let's move on to Python Basics. So I know Ava, you have a copy of Python Basics.
Yes.
Who else here has either a physical copy or has the electronic version?
I got the electronic.
Hector's got the electronic.
I have a PDF too. Yeah.
Okay, great. Janu says she has the electronic. Yeah,
And
so
it's really nice, nice book for the starters and for the advanced even developers. It's basics which leads you and guides you how you Python. Yeah, I like it. I like it.
thank you. That's really good to hear. It was a long process getting this book put together, which I think is true of like any book. But it just took a lot longer than I expected. Ava, yeah, you have a question?
Book. I especially like the last two chapters on scientific computing and GUIs.
Yeah.
Dash, Tinker, and all of that business.
Yeah. So the chapter on scientific computing is kind of a shorter one, but it's like meant to just be an introduction to NumPy and to Matplotlib, and then the graphical user interface one is a bit longer, and it's almost a mini book in itself. I think the chapter is like 100 pages, but I wanted to kind of like tie everything you learned in the book into, like a kind of a project you could actually build, and you actually come away with a couple of an example application of a text editor and like a little temperature converter. But yeah, I'm glad you like those. I had not done so when I sat down to write the chapter on graphical user interfaces. I had actually not done much GUI work in Python. I'd done some GUI work in Java previously, but had not done too much in Python. So I had to do quite a bit of research on that, and I was really pleased with the result. I think one of the things that I found in the research, and this is not really meant to like knock anyone that has written any like Tkinter tutorials or anything like that, but I found at least the like documentation for the Tkinter module to be severely lacking. There's really not any documentation for it in the Python docs, and that's because it's not really a Python project. It's written in the TCL or TK language, and it's a pre-existing project that exists outside of Python. Python, when you install Python from the python.org installer, you get like you actually get a copy of the TCL language, and you also get like the TK and everything, bindings and all that installed with it. And then the Tkinter module in Python is just kind of this wrapper around that, so that allows you to use it in Python. And if you go to the Python docs, there's really not really much documentation on Tkinter. There's like a very little tiny bit, but and then if you try to like, when you search for documentation, I just found it really lacking. There just wasn't a lot of really good like online resources. There's some books out there that are like specifically about Tkinter and Python, and there's some good stuff there, and they go into like way more advanced topics than what the Python Basics book includes. But when I was writing it and everything, I found that the only way that I could really get the information that I needed and really answer the questions that I had was to go to the like official TK docs, which are not in Python. They're all in this Tcl language. So I had to like read it there, like, okay, that's what's going on. And then kind of figure out like, how does that translate back into Python? And so that was one of my goals with that chapter, is to really provide a good, solid introduction to Tkinter, and kind of provide the means to make some basic GUI applications using that, and then from there you'd be able to branch off into some of the more advanced stuff.
But David, on that note, that makes Decanter much more approachable. In fact, the way the whole book is written is far more approachable than a number of books I've looked at on basic Python.
Oh, that's good to hear. That was the intent. But of course, as an author, it's always like you never know until other people actually read it and tell you whether or not you achieved your goal. So,
University of Michigan, Python for Everyone. It's freely available on the internet, but it's pretty awkward, kind of dense. I've been dealing with it for well over a year now. But when Real Python, I signed up and it came along, it made a huge difference. Huge difference.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Daryl posted a question in the chat here. Are there any plans to write an intermediate level book, Python intermediate, if you will? As of right now, there's no plans because we already have the Python tricks book written by Dan Bader. So that's not really like published under the Real Python brand. It was written before Dan purchased the Real Python site and everything. But that pretty much serves, like, if you read Python basics, then you're like, it kind of leaves you off at exactly the right level to then jump into the Python tricks book and sort of take everything one step further. So that's really the I guess the intermediate book. I don't know if we'll be doing anything like separate from that in the future. I think that, so some of you may have heard about the CPython internals book that Anthony Shaw is writing. And I think kind of the idea is we'd have like this 3-book, there'd be Python basics, there'd be Python tricks, and then the CPython internals. And it would sort of be like your basics, intermediate, and advanced books. Because the CPython internals, like if you read that, then I mean, you have like a really solid understanding of how Python works, like under the surface, and really would be considered, really advanced at that point. So that's the goal. I do think that we may see some other books pop up. None of this is like really for certain or anything, but what we may do is take some like specific topics, something like, Django or web development or maybe data science or something, and have like a topic specific book. Now, as of right now, there's, nothing in the works. So, don't think like, oh, it's coming soon or anything like that. But I could see that potentially being a direction that we go with the books. But as far as an intermediate one, Python Tricks is really meant to be that book. So while I'm waiting, I guess, for some more questions to come in, I kind of wanted to tell the story a little bit of how the book even came about. So I started writing for Real Python around January or February of 2018. I think my very first article was published in March of that year. It might have been February or March of that year. And it was a really great experience. It was an article on doing speech recognition with Python, and I just had a good experience, with Dan and everything, and writing it and having it reviewed and getting that out. And I think a few months after that, maybe like towards the summer of 2018, Dan approached me that, hey, Real Python has this thing called the Real Python course bundle, which was a collection of ebooks. There's they just call them like Real Python course volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. And volume 1 was like a kind of an introduction to Python book. Volume 2, I think, was like a beginner's web development book, and then volume 3, I think, is like a more advanced web development book. But Dan was really interested in updating the first volume to the latest version of Python, which I believe was 3.6 at the time. I could be wrong. 3.6 or 3.7. So I said, okay, well, let's, I'd be happy to do that. And let's, take a stab at it. It really wasn't meant to be like any kind of big project. Like it was really like, let's just go through the code. Does it still work? Are there anything that needs to change? Like 3.6 has this thing called F strings. They're pretty cool. Like maybe we should talk about those and include those in the book. Just, some little things like that. And that was written by Fletcher Heisler, who was one of the original founders of RealPython. For those of you that don't know, Fletcher and someone by the name of Michael Herman, there may have been another person that kind of co-owned it, but those are the two that I'm familiar with. They owned RealPython prior to Dan taking it over. He actually purchased it from them in 2017 or 2018 and kind of took over that. They were interested in going in other directions. Fletcher, I think, has like a consulting service now, and Michael is the founder of something called testdriven.io, which is a really fantastic website that focuses a lot on like web development and DevOps. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, they've got a lot of great like Docker tutorials and REST API tutorials and things like that. But anyway, so Fletcher wrote this RealPython course, volume 1. And as I started digging into it, it was really good. And a lot of people had already purchased it and read it and gotten a lot of benefit from it. But as I was reading through it, I kind of immediately realized that the style was just like very, very different from what we were publishing on RealPython currently. And I thought it'd be nice to have it, consistent with the style, so that when people go and read an article on RealPython and then they read the book, like it's not like a jarring transition. Like there's a similar format. There's things they expect. So that turned into, okay, well, let's sort of reformat the book to match that style. And that kind of snowballed into becoming kind of an entire rewrite. And it ended up taking about 2 years to finish the writing aspect of that. During the course of those 2 years, I had in 2019, in May of 2019, and then again in September of 2019, we had some floods here in Houston. And my house flooded both of those times. We had almost 2 feet of water in the house each time. So it was like, in the middle of trying to like write this book and then dealing with like all of that, it was a pretty chaotic period there. But somehow like I was able to push through and keep working on it. And yeah, so now it's, it's just something I'm really, really proud of. And I think that, it's good to be done, and it's good to see it like out and finally out in the world. That's like a huge, both, I guess, kind of like relief to kind of like, okay, like we actually did it. It's quote unquote done. I mean, it's not really done in the sense that now we have to maintain this thing, and we'll probably be publishing updates over the course of the coming years just to keep it up to date with the latest versions of Python and everything. But yeah, so that's kind of the story of how it all came about, and some of the trials involved in getting there. I also want to just mention, there's 4 authors on the book. There's myself, Dan Bader. The third author is Joanna Jablonski. And then the fourth is Fletcher, because it really, Fletcher's influence is still like permeates the book. There's a lot of things, a lot of exercises, a lot of concepts, and a lot of even some of the ways things were explained that I kept that and kept the influence there and didn't want to get rid of it. A lot of the challenges in the book are like basically just ported over from Fletcher's challenges. So Fletcher, even though we kind of rewrote everything, and I think I touched like probably 99% of the book that he wrote, like his influence is absolutely still there. and he really provided the foundation. But Joanna is the executive editor at Real Python, and she is, when we talk about the Real Python style, Joanna is kind of the architect of that. She has been like immensely important in kind of maintaining that quality standard, and we have a style guide that we use at Real Python that is very detailed, and she's been the one that puts that together. Joanna reviews every article that gets published, and helps authors kind of look at it from an educational perspective. We call it a didactic review, and she really kind of gives authors like, okay, you've been like, looking at this like this in front of you, and like we're going to like step back and try to look at it from like a student's perspective, and like what could potentially work, what isn't working, what could work better, where are the improvements to help that education experience. So Joanna did the same thing for Python Basics. So she read the entire thing. It's like a 640-page book, and provided me with a whole bunch of feedback on this, like the educational experience and everything. So, I just want to kind of mention her and that influence that she had, and she's such a fantastic editor. The book and Real Python, as it exists today, would not be the same without Joanna. So she's a huge part of this as well. Jinyu said, is Flask good for the website I want to build? Yeah, Flask and Django both would work. Of the two, from what you're describing, of the two, I would probably recommend Flask more, just because it's so lightweight. But it just depends. Like if you really want to learn Django, then it's probably a good idea to do something in Django just to learn it. But if we're talking about like what's the best tool for it, like I think something like a static site would probably be the best. And then if you want to do like a dynamic, then Flask is probably what I would go with for something for simple like that, like a blog. And we have a whole bunch of Flask tutorials on Real Python. There is also this thing called the Flask Mega Tutorial, written by Miguel Greenberg. And I highly recommend checking that out as well. It's a really fantastic course. It's freely available online. You can purchase, I think, like a paperback version if you want, but you can also just search Flask Mega Tutorial, and you can access all of it on Miguel's website. So any questions about Python Basics? If you guys have been reading it, do you have any kind of questions about anything that's in the book, or anything you've encountered that you're just curious to learn more, or any criticisms, like whatever?
David.
Yes.
I always look for in any book is the index.
Yeah.
I notice you don't have an index really there.
Yes, that is correct. So a while ago, probably halfway through this whole project, I brought this up. I said, we don't have an index. And I come from an academic background. I used an index.
Yes.
I mean, that was like the first thing I would look at the table of contents, maybe a little, and then I was like, okay, go to the index and find the specific thing I'm looking for and see if I can find it. So, Python Tricks doesn't have an index either. So it's the need for an index doesn't seem to be as big as I thought it would be. Meaning like not as many people are like requesting that feature as I kind of expected would be. The other thing is that from a technical perspective, it's actually it's not like super straightforward to build an index. And And for something as large as Python basics, I guess that was kind of the decision we came to, is that based on Dan's experience with Python tricks, there wasn't a huge demand for an index. And so the effort that it would take to create the index didn't sort of meet the demand, kind of a thing. If there is a lot of demand for it, then, it's something we might consider for like the next version, or the next edition, I guess is the word you use for books. But yeah, I mean, let us know. Let us if you want an index, if that's something you find. I know that there are a couple people that I've already seen that have mentioned like it's missing an index, and that's really kind of a deal breaker for me. But I did try to write the table of contents in such a way that you could use the table of contents to kind of navigate and find what you're looking for. But some of the sections are still quite large and hard to kind of pinpoint like exactly the concept you're looking for. The book does use bolding. So as you're flipping through, you'll see key terms like, in bold. Can be one way. I mean, again, I know this, like, none of this is like a real replacement for an index, but
how about this? It would be easier just to incorporate into the digital version of Python basics.
Yeah, I think if we do end up doing one, that's where it'll go, like immediately. There'll be in the digital version, you'll have that. And then whenever we release the next paperback edition, it would probably be included there as well, if there's enough demand. But yeah, that's kind of the story with the index. So I wanted one, and I was kind of like, I mean, it just seems weird. Like a book without an index doesn't seem useful. I mean, a book like this, a fiction book with an index would be kind of odd, but you're going to use to study. Just Wade says he votes for an index. Yeah. So I don't know. It's something let's consider for the future, but there are definitely some technical hurdles there that make it difficult and add kind of a significant maintenance burden to it as so that's something we just kind of have to weigh with all of that. But thank you for, it's always good. It's all feedback I want. Like
it's really great as is, no doubt, the book. Yes.
Thank you. So about 12 minutes left. And is there any like Python basic specific question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've been trying to work with Dash and Plotly, and I found an excellent instructor on YouTube called Adam Schroeder. He's really Adam Schroeder. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not actually.
Please check him out and see what you think.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, this is Anubrata from India. Can I say something?
Please.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi. This is Anubrata. Hi, David. Yeah. Hi. I had a request. I was looking at the price of the book. So in Indian rupees, it's 3,000 odd rupees, right? Now, if I look at a book like Fluent Python, it's some 600 rupees. What I was thinking is, sometimes this, universities and all that, they have something like an Eastern Economy edition, where it is a little bit watered down, but it is also cheaper.
Yeah.
So if you can think of something like that, it will be good for people here in like India and Asia kind of a thing, at least more people can go through your book. So I would request if you can think of something like that.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's a really good point. Actually, I had a discussion with someone in Slack with one the other day, direct message, another member that's in India, and so we are planning on doing exactly that. That right now, the way it's being distributed through like the I didn't actually do the that was all handled by Dan, so I'm not really sure like how exactly but the way that it's being distributed right now through Amazon, can't do that. There's another option that that Dan did with Python that does exactly what you're saying. It'll like an Eastern economy edition, and so is what to be doing not have a time for it, but it is going to be happening in the future, so that we will have an affordable version available. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, it's the economic and
yeah. That will be great. That will be great. Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot.
Yep. So it's available. I will let everyone know. I hope it's open later, but it is coming. So keep an eye out for that.
In addition to Python basics books, I got the Python tricks of Dan's book as well. That is a good one as well. Python tricks recommended. It gives a little bit specifics on different cases, but it's really good one too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Python tricks is going to go deep into like some of the data structures and things like object-oriented project. There is an object-oriented project for in Python tricks. It is very basic, as the name would imply.
Right.
It's meant to be just kind of like a very, just an introduction to like how to write in class, but it doesn't get into this idea of the model in Python tricks to go a lot further. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. We wanted to make them kind of complementary. Like if you went through Python basic, then there very little, if any, with tricks, and so you kind of read Python basics and learn the language and get into it, and then get to the next level with tricks. So
it's been breaking up quite a lot. Is that just for me, the audio, or is it? I'm just wondering if other people hear that too, or is it just my internet connection?
Like, I don't know about myself, but I've been able to hear everyone clearly.
You're breaking up in as well.
Oh,
yeah, I think it's on your side, David.
Interesting. Could be.
And I'm only
yeah, everyone's saying it's everyone for about 10 minutes. Maybe something's maybe internet. If it's still not, but everyone's nice and clean. I guess it's just upload and
yeah, we can hear you, but it just kind of like jumps back every once in a while, and then like a word comes in double, and then another word gets swallowed. That's kind of like how it's been going for the past couple minutes.
Well, yeah, I just signed to get installing fiber in my neighborhood, and finally, and it got on the way to get that. It's available, so I'm hoping. I don't know when it'll be available. I'm hoping time in the next be able to get onto a better connection and higher speed, more stable, more connection. I'm not sure what to do right now to prove anything. Hopefully we've only got about 5 minutes left anyway. So anyway, Hector says you just ordered a physical copy. Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks. Do you prefer Santi or Hector or what?
Santi.
Okay. Gotcha. That's what I'll use. I guess that's why you put it. I should have.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
You're having a call in the middle of a university class, Santi.
Yeah, actually, I'm doing homework at the same time listening to David, believe it or not.
Multitasking. So it's good.
I'm paying more attention to it than what I'm paying attention to class.
I'm gonna scroll through some of the comments just to see if that's
Not getting anything, David.
sorry, I'm scrolling. I'm to see if any questions there about the book.
You're becoming more and more robotic with your voice. Slowly turning into a computer here. It looks like it.
It's
slowly.
Yeah. Too many streams going on your end. Too much.
Stream is causing some issues. I don't. Well,
sorry.
If we will, we'll just hear a little if we get too for everyone. So last question. I mean, feel to speak or drop.
David, is it possible to like become really good at just doing APIs and be able to actually find a job in the job market as an API specialist?
Yeah. Definitely. There are higher filters.
Too much, I can't even understand.
Yeah. I'm going to off my video. I don't know if but yeah, that is possible.
Oh, that was good. Making me cranky.
It sounds like broken. I would just send a ping to Google to see if the packets are coming back to you, kind of like complete or not, because it sounds like for some reason you got some interference somehow.
Yeah.
It's never been like.
Yeah. Well, he's probably not going to be able to fix that in the next 3 minutes. So,
yeah.
But until the next time, I'm sure we can have it back up.
All right. I'm sorry. Short.
It's never been like this before. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. If I'm so what?
I'm not lip reading. I see your lips, baby. It's not much.
I'll try.